Radio legend Johnnie Walker is with me talking to Dry Stone Radio. Thank you very much. It's a privilege to talk to you.
You're very welcome. It's very nice to meet you.
What brought you to Edinburgh, the Fringe Festival?
Well, my boss that I used to work with in the 80s at a radio station called Radio Wiltshire, his name is Ralph Bernard, and he asked me to come to the station, leave the one I was at in Bristol. And I said, well, why would I want to leave a bigger station for a smaller one? He said, because you can do different things with us. You know, you can do a bit of news presentation and you can do interview shows. You can learn how to interview. So when he called me up earlier this year, you know, some 30-odd years later, and said, I'm doing a whole bunch of shows at a venue at the Edinburgh Fringe. Would you like to come and do an interview show? So I said, yeah, fantastic. I mean, I've been aware of the Fringe, obviously. And so many people have said great things about it, and I've only really had a very quick one-day visit last year. So I love new things. I love trying things that I haven't done before, and this was a perfect opportunity to come and do this show.
And you've been enjoying the atmosphere of it all. Have you got to see many shows so far? We are quite early into it, but...
Yeah, I've sort of made a special point to see the shows of people who are my guests. So I saw Mitch Benn's show, I went and saw Stephen Burkoff's new play. I went to a press night at the Stand where they had 10 comedians do 5 minutes each. That was pretty good. So there's a lot of shows that I do want to go and see. But there's also a lot of great restaurants. There's a lot of fantastic pubs. I really, envy the people of Edinburgh. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people come to the Fringe as much for the drinking and the eating as they do for the and the atmosphere. You know, it's a fantastic atmosphere.
You've got some incredible guests on your shows over the next couple of weeks. How did you go about choosing the guests, sourcing them, and discussing what you're going to talk about on stage?
Well, I had some help. I talked with Ralph about it, and we thought we wanted guests from as wide a range as we could get. And there's a radio producer called Rebecca Maxted, who used to work on my Sounds of the 70s shows, now freelance. So she fortunately wasn't doing too much, and she had the time to really work on booking the guests. So we've got a huge range, people like Francis Rossi, Esther Ranson, Elizabeth McGovern from Downton Abbey. In fact, it's got a band called Sadie and the Hot Rods. Tony Benn's coming, who actually, when he was a Labour minister in 1967, put me out of work when I was on the pirate ship. So
should be interesting.
Yeah, I've had a bone to pick with him all these years. So he's coming on the 13th, so I think that should be fun.
One of the names I'm unfortunately going to be leaving Edinburgh in the next couple of days, so I'm going to miss it, but Martha Reeves would be a big thrill for me personally. Do you plan what you're going to be talking about on the day, or is it you've got kind of ideas of what you're going to talk about across the hour?
Somebody like Martha Reeves obviously is very easy, because I've loved the records that she and the Vandellas have made over the years. Dancing in the Street, such a fantastic record. And I know a bit of the story about that, which I'm sure she'll tell, which was there was a huge heat wave going on in Detroit. And when the temperature gets really hot, people tend to get a bit more edgy. And there was riots going on and things like that. And Motown really wanted to try and put something out that would kind of calm things down, which is how that whole Dancing in the Streets was born, really. And she loves England, and she loves the UK, and she's toured in England and Scotland. And so one of the things I found out when I interviewed her was she had to wear a fur coat to bed because she was so cold. She couldn't believe how cold it was. And also she got a liking for Guinness. She loves a pint of Guinness. You'd never think Martha Reeves would love a pint of Guinness. So for somebody like her, that's quite easy. For another guest that, like, say, Tony Benn or Elizabeth McGovern, somebody who I'm not really familiar with, who's not a music person, then I just do lots of research, really.
Okay.
And then I try and do the research on the morning of the day they're going to guest, so it's all fresh in my mind. And I try and have a conversation. I try and treat them as just a person, as well as maybe being a famous person, and just finding out about them as a human being.
You get more out of it treating them like a person.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. I think I was like, people, even on my radio shows, people used to come in and there'd be a record playing and they say, "What's your first question?" I said, "I don't know." And I genuinely didn't know, because I just wanted it to be spontaneous.
Right.
And if I said, well, my first question's going to be, they're going to be thinking about it, for while the record's playing, and it just wouldn't be spontaneous. So I've obviously got a few questions in the back of my mind, some written down on a piece of paper on the table just in case I really get stuck. Because the worst thing that happens really when you're interviewing someone, I think the key to interviewing is part of your mind has got to be concentrating on what they're saying. You've got to listen. And then the other part is forming the next question you're going to ask them after they've finished talking. And I've had interviewers over the years who interview me, and it doesn't matter what I say to them, they go, right, okay, and they just go to the next one on the list. And they never respond to anything I've said. You know. So it's obviously good to have a list of questions, but it's also good to try and listen as well.
I'm feeling very self-conscious about my list of questions.
You're doing a very good job. You're doing a very good job. And the more you do it, the better you get. It's like everything, really.
Like riding a bike.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you've got a vast, years of experience. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self when you kind of first started in radio?
What advice I give to who?
To yourself, 20-year-old self.
My 20-year-old self. That is a very good question. I guess it'd probably be think before taking actions, think before doing. But my nature, I'm Aries, and I do believe that we do have characteristics of the different astrological signs. Aries is very impatient. They just want new things and they want to get on with things.
I'm Aries too.
You're Aries, right. So even if I had had that advice at the age of 20, I probably wouldn't have listened. Mind you, it's very good that a young person like you is really interested in radio, because the fear is that radio is so formatted now and so not spontaneous, and so much music is available through Spotify or wherever that people don't really listen. Young people don't really get into radio anymore. So
I get told off by my boyfriend quite a lot because I don't listen to a full album.
Yeah.
And he's a musician, so he needs the full album, kind of back to back.
And you're checking tracks to see which one you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things you were well known for, that you would play an album track during the show as well. And were you kind of condemned for that?
I got in a lot of trouble for that. It was during the 70s when Radio 1 was very much about, it was a top 40 radio station, which you played hit singles that are in the chart and ones that maybe you think are going to go in the chart. But there was an awful lot of music that didn't necessarily release as a single or get into the charts. And some of the artists I played that were considered risque by the management, even Rod Stewart, I used to play his records, and they said, that's not suitable for Radio 1. I was the first person to play the Eagles, and Fleetwood Mac, and Steely Dan, and Steve Harley, and Lou Reed, and lots of music like that. Bad Company, they made great albums, I played album tracks. So we had this idea that we call it the family album swap. And a family would send in 3 album tracks, maybe mother, father, or mother, brother, sister, daughter, whatever. Members of the family would each pick a track. And it was really an excuse to play albums. But I did get in a lot of trouble for it.
That's kind of something that's filtered into Radio 6 now, hasn't it, though? Like, they're not afraid to play radio albums, and, that might have come from you being the brave one to do that at first.
Yeah, I mean, in many cases, if you listen to an album and you spotted 2 or 3 good tracks and you play them, you're playing the single that's going to be coming out in 2 or 3 months' time. Because a lot of good tracks come out as singles. And they just seem to be very frightened of album tracks.
Right.
So it's the same music. I know it's on a big thing and it goes around a bit slow, but it's just the same.
Now, we've said that you've got a great bill over the next couple of weeks, of the Fringe. Who, for you, has been like the biggest thrill to interview? Who's, have you got the best interview out of? I
think Paul Simon. I was so frightened about meeting Paul Simon. I've loved his music and Simon and Garfunkel. In fact, first radio station I was on in 1966 called Radio England. Sounds of Silence, Hazy Shade of Winter, really early Simon and Garfunkel stuff I was playing. And through the 70s on Radio 1, I loved that Kodachrome, There Goes Rhyming Simon album. So I loved him hugely and his music. So I was really nervous about interviewing him, and he was delightful. He was a lovely guy. Some people are difficult until they realise you actually know a bit about them and their music, and once they get a sense of that, then they're okay. Because a lot of these people do get some interviewers who know very little about them, and they get tired of it, and you can understand that.
Yeah, definitely. And so, in that case, some people say don't meet your heroes, but that worked out quite well for you.
Do you know, my wife is a huge fan of David Bowie. He was one of the most important influences on her life. And you talk to a lot of people, and they watched Top of the Pops in 1972, and they saw David Bowie perform Starman, and it changed a lot of people's lives. A lot of musicians changed, and a lot of music lovers changed. Anyway, she's a huge fan of David Bowie. I meet her, we get married. David Bowie's doing a special concert in the Maida Vale Studios, so I knew I'd be able to get us in. So I said, would you like to come? She said, of course I would. And I said, well, I'll see if I can arrange for you to meet David Bowie. And it was a bit difficult because David was only going to meet 7 people, and all the head important people from the BBC were there. So anyway, I managed to follow them at a distance and find out what room they went in. I just stood outside the door, and I said to Tiggy, just stand there. So David is sort of going to bump into you when he comes out the room. David Bowie comes out of the room, and I just walked up and said, David, Johnnie Walker, I wonder if I might just introduce my wife, Tiggy. So he swings his eyes onto Tiggy, he takes her by the hand, and Tiggy just looks at him and goes, and this really was her huge, huge idol. She looked at him and said, I don't know what to say. And he said, I don't know what to say either. And he just held her eye contact, and for that moment nobody else existed in the world apart from David Bowie and Tiggy. And Tiggy said, that's it, I don't need to ever meet anybody else. I've met David Bowie. So he absolutely came up and exceeded her expectations, which is fabulous.
That is, yes.
So I think you should meet your heroes, but sometimes you might be disappointed. But also they lead very stressful lives. There's a lot of demands on their time, so they haven't always got the time to. Eddie Izzard was spotted in a pub once looking all scruffy in a tracksuit, and this guy came up to him, and he really should kind of suss that this is Eddie's local. He's, Anyway, he goes up and says, here, are you Eddie Izzard? And Eddie Izzard goes, yeah, but I'm off duty. And people are entitled to be off duty.
Definitely.
Yeah.
If firemen are allowed to be, celebrities are as well. Now, just a couple more questions. How do you think that your style's changed over the years, or has it changed at all?
My broadcasting style?
Yeah.
I don't think it's changed that much, really. I've always, I think, tried to be as real as possible. Try to
genuine.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of different DJs. There's Kenny Everett who did the most amazing things between records. There are some DJs like Wolfgang Jack, the American one, who would really go into DJ pattern. That was his thing. And then I just wanted to just talk to people, and that's kind of been my style, I suppose. Laid back is how people tend to describe it. But, so I don't think it's changed that much over the years, really.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you, and good luck with the rest of the Fringe Festival.
Thank you very much, and good luck with your radio station.
Thank you.